The movie Wicked came out recently, and it's been a huge box office smash, breaking records, and it's coming on the back of a very successful Broadway show that's been running now since 2003, so over 20 years. I thought it would be interesting to look at it from a spiritual perspective. What are some of the big lessons that we see in Wicked? I'm going to be fully transparent. I've seen the musical live 4 times. My mother loves it, so she's dragged me a bunch. And I was a music theater major in college 2005, so right after Wicked became super popular. But I'll be very frank, I'm not a huge fan of how mean it is. The book is much darker, much crueler, but even still, the stage musical, people are not very nice. People really hurt one another pretty readily. So my initial thought was, I don't want to talk about the spirituality of Wicked. It's a pretty nefarious vibe. But I think even in the darkest situations, there is always light, there is always things to take away and learn. So I want to highlight what I see as being the top spiritual messages from Wicked. Because I do want to talk about full character arcs, I am going to talk about things from Act 2, which if you're waiting until Part 2 comes out next year to find out what happens to Elfie and Glinda, there are going to be spoilers. There's no way I can avoid that. But let's dive into what are some of the spiritual messages of Wicked and how we can take that into our personal life to live better. And it's nice to meet you guys. If we haven't met before, my name is Kalen. I am a spiritual guide. I host this YouTube channel. I've written some books. I run retreats. And I really try to help people come home to themselves and live a more joyful, authentic, integrated life. Let's start with one of the most prevalent themes in the story of Wicked. And that's the idea of that which brings us shame, that which we try to hide ends up being our biggest gift. Elphaba goes through this story arc of her gift of magic being something that she tries to shove into the back room. It's only caused pain and suffering. And then she has university. It ends up being this gift that gives her all these opportunities. If you get the choice of having magic powers or not having magic powers, if you get to fly versus not fly, I think all of us would choose fly. All of us have had experiences where the thing we thought was shameful or dirty or wrong or broken ended up being our superpower. It ended up being our gateway to opportunities. It opened new pathways for us to explore because we could do something other people couldn't. It gave us new insights that other people didn't have. Oftentimes, that which feels bad or wrong can end up being amazing and beautiful. This is a huge part of my own spiritual work, and that focuses on reclaiming wholeness. Starting to realize there is nothing bad, there's nothing dirty, there's nothing sinful, there's nothing broken. These are just parts we haven't integrated. Sometimes this is referred to as our shadow selves, those parts that we have tried to keep hidden, that we've shoved into back rooms, into the attics, into the cellars. And it's very hard to be a whole person when there's parts of you being sequestered away. When we can bring all of that in, when we can start to see all of our parts as beautiful, as holy, as sacred, then we open up to our full potential. Then we reclaim our powers, whether it's flight or, just to be able to be really good in business in certain arenas. Becoming whole is the pathway towards wellness. And obviously, Elphaba's journey is not a comfortable one, but the great thing is by the end of the play Wicked, she's partnered with the person that she loves, and she has arrived at a state outside of society where she's finally found freedom. So ultimately, it does lead her to a good place, but there's sure a lot of ordeals she has to go through in the interim. Another spiritual message of Wicked is challenging what society tells you is right and good. The first half of the play, we think the wizard is this beneficent force, all-powerful, all-wonderful. Throughout the play, Glinda gets positioned as this force of good when she's really very morally ambiguous. She's not an objectively, quote-unquote, good person. She's very much attention-seeking. She's very much doing whatever will make people love her. For the most part, there are some redeeming moments, of course, that humanize her. But she really only helps people when it's convenient to her. We see the head of the magical program, Mrs. Warrable, probably involved with taking away the sentience and speaking abilities of the animals, is serving as the right-wing henchman to this horrible monster that the wizard ends up being, this controlling, dark, manipulative force. So we see these things that society is positioned as being good and helpful, but as you start to dig a little bit deeper, maybe that isn't the case. And I think this is a nice thing for us to recall, is that just because something's scary, just because it's taboo, just because we've been told it's bad, does not make it objectively so. In fact, I've often found the most sacred things are the ones that are living on the periphery, that are on the edges of society, that are the things that are rejected. Because spirit is the other world. And when we step outside of our world, we start to step into spirit. Those who live on the boundary often can peer back through the veil and connect more deeply with the divine. And this is why I've always said that those who exist in marginalized communities, whether it's because of their immigrant status, because of their gender identity, their sexuality, are often more spiritually attuned and often have more psychic abilities than people who are living a very mainstream heteronormative life. Now, that's not to say that they're better, but that marginalization, that stepping outside the bounds of normality, ends up providing a gift in and of itself. And it allows us to see society in different ways. So we aren't just blindly going along saying, yes, the wizard's wonderful, all hail the Wizard of Oz. Instead, we're saying, oh, not everything's right in the Emerald City. Maybe we need to change. It gives us that perspective, that wisdom, and that insight. So seeing the beauty in the outsider status and learning to challenge the norms. Tied into that is this idea of just breaking through illusion. Many spiritual traditions talk about this idea of the great dream or Maya, that we're living in a fabricated reality. Part of the spiritual journey is to start to pierce the veil, to start to see things from a more objective place and realize that this is all a dream. Where is truth? And truth exists in here for all of us, if we can dig deep enough to find it. A spiritual message we see in Wicca is definitely tied to the conclusion of Act 1 with the big song Defying Gravity. And it's this idea to just reclaim your power, to step off the proverbial or literal ledge and give yourself the opportunity to fly, to stop being small, to stop holding back, to stop limiting yourself. Earlier in the film, we saw Elphaba almost able to fly. She could jump really far, but it wasn't until she gave no more crap for what people thought that she was able to really take off and soar. How often in our own life are we holding back our full potential because of fear of judgment, or fear of being different, or fear of failure, or fear of being critiqued, or good people don't do that? How are we able to step into the wild, the untamed, the feral, and reclaim our totality, even if it seems scary, even if it seems wrong, even if it seems bad, even if it seems dangerous? So this idea of, you know what, I'm going to flip you all off because I am following my own heart. I am trusting my divine guidance, and I don't care what people say. I am not going back. I'm not lowering myself for anyone. And nobody in all of Oz is ever going to bring me down. In the musical and in the movie, it really is a love story. Now we have the love between Fiyero and Elphaba and Fiyero and Glinda. We also have the love between Glinda and Elphaba. There's been some conversations on the press tour where Ariana has suggested that maybe Glinda is a little bisexual. Maybe there is a little romantic tension between them. I think that gives a really interesting insight into the song. What is this feeling so sudden and new? I felt the moment I laid eyes on you. My pulse is rushing, my head is reeling, my face is flushing. What is this feeling? That could be loathing, but it could also be attraction. I think the really interesting thing about how Stephen Schwartz wrote the song of where they recognize with each other in Act 2 for good. Who can say if I've been changed for the better, but I have been changed for good? It's saying that the road hasn't been easy. It hasn't been all roses and frolicking through the marigolds. It's been challenging. But through those challenges, we have grown, we have evolved. And yeah, we've been roughed up, we've had our hearts broken, we've gone through some really tough stuff. But ultimately, I think I'm a better person for having loved you and known you. And that is the power of love. The power of love, I believe, is the force of God. It is the force of God consciousness that we experience here on earth, whether you want to call that the Holy Ghost, or you want to call that Shakti, whatever terminology you want to use. So love is one of the reasons we are here, to give and receive love. We see these characters, even though they are not going to come out and say, oh, I'm so much better for being loved, they tiptoe around it and say, I've been changed for the better because of what we have shared. Another striking spiritual message I see in Wicked is the notion of death and rebirth. So in every spiritual tradition, especially the ones that are esoteric, the ones that are more mystical, there is this element of you have to die and be reborn. Even in mainstream Christianity, that's the point of baptism, right? You're going to wash away your former life and be reborn in Christ consciousness. But in every shamanic tradition, you have to physically risk death. Stick your hand into an anthill full of fire ants who are going to possibly kill you. You could physically die and you might get very close to it. But through that process, there's going to be a separation between body and spirit. And you're going to start to tap into your spirituality. I've gone through this myself. Most people I know on their spiritual journey have had really intense near-death experiences, whether through a health issue or an accident or something. And if you ever watch NDE channels, near-death experience channels here on YouTube, you'll hear story after story of, I had this experience, I tapped into God consciousness, I reunited with spirit, and now I have these paranormal abilities. Learning to die and be reborn is a big part of most people's spiritual path, and it isn't always that traumatic. Parts of us are always falling away. Parts of us are always dying. And when they do, and we let them go, when we release it, we emerge into a better life, a more elevated life. Now, that process isn't easy. Most of us fight it and cry, oh, don't let my world dissolve. I love my job. I love this person. I love this relationship. Why? But if you go with it, on the other side, it always gets better. And so we see this in Wicked. We see this for Elphaba, that even though she gets, quote unquote, melted by Dorothy, she ends up being able to escape society with the person that she loves and live free of expectations. They get to wander off into the sunset together. So for her, the process of dying ends up leading to a rebirth where she's happier and more well than she's ever been at any point in the story previously. Now, granted, her partner has been torn limb from limb and turned into a stuffed scarecrow, but still, all in all, it's a leveling up for her. So these are just some of the spiritual messages that are available in Wicked. There's others we can talk about. Recognizing the self in others, seeing sentience in all forms of life, whether they're human or animal, respecting all sentient life forms. Or maybe learning non-judgment, that we shouldn't judge another person based on their external appearance, that we should learn that everyone is beautiful and sacred, whether they have green skin or purple skin, or they're 2 feet tall or 10 feet tall, it doesn't matter. We see the sacredness in all of it. There are always more spiritual perspectives we can unpack, but these are just some that jumped out at me. I would love to hear, what are some spiritual ideas you discovered when watching Wicked? Whether this was your first time or you've seen it many times, what have you learned and how did it help change you for good? Drop it in the comments. I would love to hear more about your experience. And if you found this video helpful, please do me a favor. Hit the like button, subscribe and turn notifications on. I'm currently in the process of restarting my YouTube channel after giving up one with 300,000 followers. So a little assistance in this process is mightily appreciated. So whether you're a cowardly lion, a total witch, a wizard, please know that you are welcome here. I'm glad to have shared some space with you today. Thank you for your attention. Much love and blessings.